good.
So we'll probably go ahead and just start doing introductions at 10. Did you have any questions before we start or anything?
No, I might be over by just a few minutes, but I tried to keep it to 30, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's totally fine. And then do you have a hard stop at 11? What's your schedule like?
If there is a discussion going on, I don't mind sticking around for a bit.
Okay. You can play it by ear, and yeah, just let us know if you need to get out.
Yeah.
Get moving.
Thank you.
No problem. And I have one. Could you pronounce your last name for me, just so I don't say it wrong?
Sivarajah.
Sivarajah?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I'm wondering if for the introductions, if you you might want to stop sharing the screen so you can see the speakers. I don't know if other people see that because all I see right now, or maybe it's just my settings. I don't know what people are seeing on your screens because I don't know if you need to take the floor or you be visual, but I'll leave it to you guys.
I could see the speakers because I have a double screen.
Okay.
But if it makes sense, I could stop sharing the screen and then we could put it back up, if whatever that makes sense.
I'm just trying to figure out it might just, I'm just.
Do I look small? Do I look small on your screen?
I'm gonna split the screen so it's good. So right now I see people talking and not the screen, so I don't know what other people see.
So on the side, for most people, I'm assuming it'd be on one screen, and there'd be 5 speakers that they can see. Kat, for you, is it me, Colleen, Janani, and yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I see like a black box, so that maybe that's fine. Okay.
I think
We've only done this for 7 months, you know. Just I just get nervous, but yeah, no, I think I sorted it out.
I think I became a Zoom pro, or even like Life Size and all of those other platforms. And I found during the pandemic that there's so many platforms that we were never aware of. Like there's just a lot.
Yeah, we're getting better at it, I think.
Yeah.
Not that I'm any more confident about it either. It's just like, okay, we're just rolling with it. Okay, I think I figured out how to switch. Okay, sorry, it was me.
That's okay.
It's all good. If it doesn't, if the optics aren't great for anybody, just let us know and we can figure something out.
Yeah, no, I think I sorted it. Okay, I'm gonna just shut up now. Good luck. I'm enjoying it. Really looking forward to your talk. Good luck, hosts and team. And yeah,
see ya.
I wish you wouldn't have told me there was 100 people registered. Now I'm a little bit nervous.
Oh, there's 100?
100 people registered.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Our first seminar reached, I think, 60, and we had 70 registered. So I'm assuming it'll be around the same ratio there.
That's a good percentage.
It is.
You never know when people are going to get up on a Friday.
That's true.
Or if people will get up on a Friday.
My regrets today are that some people went to the field because the weather is fine, you know, today. So they're like, sorry, you can't come, which is totally understandable.
Yeah.
But public health and forest and everything is a hot topic right now. So hopefully everyone will turn around.
Yeah.
It'll be nice to see what other people are thinking about this topic, right? Like, it's just a lot of like different ways of thinking about public health and urban forest. So it'll be nice.
I don't think I've heard the term urban forests before. It makes so much sense that somebody's considering that dynamic, but even that concept was new to me in reading about your work. So super excited.
Oh, so okay. So that puts a lot of things in perspective. So I might have to like take my time explaining some of the concepts.
That's just me. Other people might be more familiar.
No,
I'm going from anthropology, so maybe there's a sector of that I'm just not familiar with.
Yeah, urban forestry, I guess it has been over the years transformed into this like almost interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary concept, because a lot of people have been bringing in different sectors together, and a lot of research has been going around in this field. So like even anthropology, I'm thinking like there's like the social science piece that goes into urban forestry that could be a very interesting topic to do research on, centered around it. So there's a lot of things. So I just assume, I guess like I'm so in it, I assume that people already know it. I should take my time explaining some of these concepts. Good to know.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, it's 10 o'clock, so maybe wait one more minute. And I just want to echo, that's exactly, we have a wide-ranging audience, Canada and US, and some global potentially. We've just had a couple of last-minute registrations, so if we just give people maybe 1 or 2 more minutes, and I'll leave you, Colleen and Ryan, to take over.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay. We're at 10:02 now. I'm seeing as we're getting over the 10 o'clock mark, we just had like 5 more people register, so they could be coming in a little bit later. But I think we're going to start and stay on our schedule. So yeah, welcome everybody. Bonjour, Anine, and welcome to our second installment in the GLIER-TRUST 2020 seminar series. It's had to switch over to a virtual seminar series, but this is our second week, and we had a very first successful week. So we're super excited. My name is Ryan Graham, and I'm in the Healthy Headwaters Lab at GLIER at the University of Windsor.
And my name is Colleen Lynn. I'm a PhD student in anthropology and urban sustainability at Wayne State University.
And we will be your co-hosts for today. And yeah, we're just going to start with some housekeeping stuff, some introductions, and then we'll give the floor to Janani, our virtual speaker for today. So to begin, we'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge that the University of Windsor and the Wayne State University sits on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy First Nations, the Anishinaabe Nation, Peoria, Mi'kmaq, and the Mississauga Nations.
We as the Windsor and Wayne University communities would like to move beyond acknowledgements, and we would like to not only give our respect to the traditional territory we are on, but also commit to learning and growing, starting with our partnerships and collaborations moving forward. We are striving to move forward in a new light, guided by mutual respect, courtesy, and reconciliation.
So just some housekeeping rules, as I'm sure we're all very familiar with Zoom in this weird time. But everybody should be on mute and have their cameras off for the presentation. Please use the chat function, and we have chat facilitators that are going to be monitoring that, writing down any questions so that me or Colleen can bring them up later on. This talk will be recorded, and if it's not recording now, I just want to double check with the technical team. I think it is. By the top left, it'll tell us that it is, but just double check that it's recording. And these recordings are going to be put online. The plan is to be a connected YouTube account. That hasn't been decided yet, but just so everybody knows, the chat or the presentation will be recorded. And then besides that, the format will go, we've got 30 to 40, depending on the speaker, but we've got a 30-minute presentation. And then later on, early career researchers and anybody interested in a discussion is encouraged to stay later for the second half, where we'll be asking questions to Janani.
Thanks, Ryan. And now I'd like to introduce our invited speaker. Dr. Janani Sivarajah is an urban forestry and greening researcher, educator, and consultant. She is a postdoctoral fellow at the Environmental Sustainability Research Center, Brock University, and Vineland Research and Innovation Center. She is a Master of Forest Conservation and PhD in Forestry from the University of Toronto. Her transdisciplinary research explores the ecosystem services of urban trees and public green spaces and finds greening solutions to improve the socio-ecological resilience of cities. She is the president of the Ontario Urban Forest Council, research associate at the Department of Architectural Science of Ryerson University, and member of the Ontario Professional Foresters Association and the City of Toronto Shade Policy Steering Committee. She also lectures at Daniels Institute of Forestry and Conservation at the University of Toronto. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Sivarajah.
Thank you, Colleen and Ryan, for those warm introduction. I just want to say thank you all for virtually coming to my talk. And a big thank you goes out to the students and faculty at TRUST at Wayne State University and Great Lakes Institute for Environmental Research at the University of Windsor for hosting me today. So I hope you will all walk away with some inspiration or some new appreciation for the urban forest today. So before I start, I really want you to take a look at this photo. So ignore my friend's dog, Casual. He photobombed the photo, but I really want you to think to yourself about these two questions that I'm going to ask you. So how do you feel? And why do you feel this way? So take a moment. So if any of you feel peaceful, happier, less stressful, you're on the right track. And that's what I was going after. And this is what we call the biophilia hypothesis. So we have an innate need to stay connected to nature and other living forms on the planet. So the histories of humans and forests have long been entwined, and forests have always been considered as places of spirituality. And even during our evolutionary history, we have been so dependent on the forest, either for our livelihoods, for food, for medicine, and for shelter. So, but for many of us who do not work in like traditional forest, we are exposed to the forest that we're exposed to in our daily lives looks something like this. So this is what we call the urban or the peri-urban forest. So peri-urban refers to potential space for urban forests to develop. And with increasing gray infrastructure like concrete, bicycle lanes, and buildings, we are becoming way more isolated from some of the natural experiences that we get from forests. So we often quantify the benefits that we receive from urban forests as ecosystem services. So the term was initially first cited in 1990s by Constanza and colleagues, where they tried to put a number of value to some of the amenities that we get from nature. And this term became way more recognized after this study. So what they did was they assigned a number of value to some of the nature services, and they found that nature services almost worth $33 trillion per year. So that's double the global gross domestic product at that time in the 1990s. So when this study came out, it really created and helped urban foresters to make their case. And now if you look at any municipal policies, you wouldn't find a single urban forestry policy or even the background documents that are supporting the policy without making any sort of reference to ecosystem services. So it is a widely used term now. So for example, let's take Toronto. So Toronto is where I am currently residing, and that's where I'm really much more familiar with. So according to the recent 2018 tree canopy study that just came out last December, about 1/3 of the city is covered in trees. And these trees provide more than $55 million in ecosystem services. And these ecosystem services accounts for these abiotic factors, so such as stormwater reduction, removal of air pollutants, and many other factors that are easier to quantify. But some of the other benefits we get from the forest, like cultural and health benefits, are not accounted for. So here today I'm going to try to make the case here that some of these indirect benefits are in fact measurable, and we can model these to see and include them in these kind of models. So what I'm going to do today is to really walk you through the connection of urban forest to human health and well-being, and talk about the issues in urban planning and design and how we can address these problems and how we can effectively collaborate and communicate to work on these challenges. First, a very clear example, and this came out during the huge spur of the emerald ash borer infestation. So this is by Jeffrey Donovan and colleagues. So if those of you who might not be very familiar with the emerald ash borer, it is an invasive species. A beetle came from Asia, affected a lot of the North American ash trees, like all across North America, and was the reason for some of the decline and major setbacks in canopy covered targets across North America. So what they found was US counties that were affected with the emerald ash borer had increased mortality rates related to like cardiovascular and respiratory illnesses. Another study in Oregon looked at the same relationship between trees and poor birth outcomes. And again, you can see that some of these higher tree canopy within 50 meters of their residential homes reduce poor birth outcomes. So you can see that these indirect benefits are actually, some of them are measurable. So now I'm going to dive into some of my own work. So this came out of my doctoral research, and it was recently picked up by the BBC News. One of the aspects of urban trees for human health is UV protection. And this is by far the only study that's been done in the Northern Hemisphere. And this type of work, it's mainly done in Australia and New Zealand because skin cancer prevention, and it's really more prevalent there. But we in the Northern Hemisphere should also be very careful. And so what I did was, what's really cool about my work is that I was able to integrate different methods from occupation and public health into urban forestry work. So if you see there's like 3 little PVC tubes. Actually, my dad and I just stood at Home Depot cutting these PVC tubes at heights of like small children. And those dosimeters that you see at the very top there actually mimics the way your skin reacts to incoming UV. So what we did is, so if you were to think about ultraviolet radiation, here's a typical schoolyard in Toronto, so where much of it is covered in concrete. So UV light works very, very differently in urban settings because it has very short wavelengths of light. It has very high energy, so it can easily bounce off different structures and different surfaces in the urban settings. So a child or a pedestrian in this schoolyard or any other urban setting, they're exposed to UV either directly from the sun or diffuse radiation from bouncing off these structures. And the other way they could be exposed to UV is when UV is getting absorbed by its different surfaces and then gets re-emitted as heat. So there is a lot of things that goes around in the urban landscape. It's a very different ecosystem compared to like a traditional ecosystem that you would find in a forest. So we have to think about all of these other aspects when we're doing urban ecology or urban forestry research. So what we found was tree species that had very high protection factors. So when we talk about protection factor, it's the same thing as the SPF that you would find on sunscreen. So some of the fascinating results that came out of the study were, these were the 5 top species that came out of my study, and they have about 3 to 3.5 times longer, like if you stay under this tree, it takes about 3 to 3.5 times longer under the tree to the same level of exposure that you would get under 1 hour of sun in an open space. So it's a proportionate value. And with global projections and with climate change on the rise, we do have to design spaces with intention. So of course, some of this, if there's urban foresters or other foresters in the audience today, Norway maple came out as one of the top species for providing the high UV protection factors. But of course, it is an invasive species here in North America. So you do want to think about designing spaces with multiple objectives in mind. So what's unique from my study to some of the studies in Australia and New Zealand is that we actually looked at some of these canopy traits. So what about these canopy traits can provide effective UV protection in and how can we choose for these species in their local species pool? So if you were to go anywhere in the world and trying to look for to plant a tree to provide increased UV protection, you would want to find trees that had low crown transparency, so no gaps, low gaps within the tree, wider tree, and also shorter trees. And these are all characteristics of shade tolerant species, so species that come later in forest succession. So to simplify that a bit, these are species that you would find in a mature forest or an old growth forest. So these would be the typical traits that you would look for if you want to plant a tree for high UV protections. So we covered a lot of the physical health benefits, but some of the other aspects of urban forest, it provides psychological and other well-being effects. And here's a study by Fuller and colleagues, and they found that people who are non-trained ecologists or foresters are still able to distinguish species in higher taxa. So differences between a conifer and a deciduous species. So people are able to see the different types in a forest ecosystem. So what they found was people that have a perceived higher biodiversity found they felt better and they were able to think better. And some of the past work explained this phenomenon that I was on children's academic performance. Here's a study by myself and colleagues. And before this study came out, almost all of the previous studies before this work said children that go to greener schools have higher learning outcomes. And even after they controlled for socioeconomic factors. But what they didn't distinguish is whether trees different from other vegetation have any sort of effect or impact on children's learning outcomes. So now comes the million-dollar question. So can trees help kids perform better on tests? And the short answer is yes. So from this work, this is actually published in an open access journal, so it is available to all of you. We found that schoolyard tree cover positively affected reading, writing, and math test scores. And especially, we found larger tree effects in schools that were disadvantaged. So take, for example, 2 different schoolyards. One schoolyard have no trees, all concrete, and then you have a schoolyard with a lot of green vegetation. So if you were to plant a tree in a schoolyard that has no vegetation, and typically these kind of schoolyards are found in disadvantaged communities, the effect of that tree on their academic performance is much larger than if you were to put a tree in an already green vegetated schoolyard. So this actually went on to help the Toronto District School Board to prioritize disadvantaged schools in their large plantation program and provided support to their work. And what's even more cool about this work is that we were able to find tree composition effects on math. So we realized that different types of trees matter for you to do well for children to do well on academic performance. So specifically, we found these 4 different species, but don't go around planting these in your backyard just so you could do better on math, or you could focus a lot better on your balancing books or anything. But what this is stating is that the combination of like having coniferous and deciduous, and going back to the whole Fuller study, that the perceived biodiversity helps with how you are feeling and how you are thinking better. And it reduces like symptoms of like ADD, mental fatigue, and so many other studies have shown those effects in relating physiology to a green space. But here what we're seeing is these biodiversity effects. And this all goes back to the biophilia hypothesis. We have that innate need to stay connected with a number of species and number of living forms. So all this is to show is that urban forest and biodiversity is important for human health and well-being. So I hope I convinced you all that, in fact, urban forest and biodiversity are important. Now, when we're thinking about how we can retrieve these benefits of green spaces, humans and people need access to available, they need access to green space. And some of the colleagues and I at Brock University wrote how cities can add accessible green space in a post-coronavirus world. And this wasn't so long ago. It actually came out in May. But like, has cabin fever hit us, a lot of people started seeking these public spaces and parks. So which got us thinking about access and availability. And that was one of the inspiration for writing this article. And some of the inspiration actually came out with the Trinity Bellwoods example. So this is a park that is in the middle of downtown Toronto. And you can see at the photograph on the left there, there's just a lot of people. And this is not a normal day. This is when the pandemic was at its height. So you saw a lot of people going into these parks, and they were not practicing social distancing. And a part of the reason for that is because a lot of the available green spaces in Toronto is on the outskirts of the city. So even though there's 28 meters square for every single person in Toronto, a lot of the available spaces was on the outside. And a lot of the population was concentrated in the dense downtown cores. And what we need to start thinking about is this accessibility issue and availability issue in major cities. Some of the current approaches to add green space in cities is to use this incremental approach, to add green infrastructure into already existing green infrastructure. So going in, planting more trees, increasing tree canopy cover, they all have their benefits. I'm not saying those are bad approaches, but obviously these efforts sometimes backfire, leaving poor habitats for trees and any other green life. So when we are thinking about infusing green infrastructure into already existing green infrastructure, there's not available space to plant like a mass oak tree or like any bigger trees. And sometimes it can be innovative, but it could be very, very costly. So this is a photograph from Osaka, Japan, where my friend went on vacation, and she took this photo. But you see the tree there is doing quite well, but this is probably the biggest it's going to ever get in this kind of setting. It's not going to get any bigger than that. And ecologists and urban foresters know that the bigger the tree, the more benefits it provides human population. So we want big trees, because bigger the tree, that it provides like all of these ecosystem services, either direct or indirect benefits. So often when we're developing like a subdivision, so this is a photograph from Google Views, and we try to create like a clean slate to make construction happen. So whether that's removing topsoil and packing it down with concrete. So the image at the top right here is before 2007, so where you see 2 big mass trees. But then in 2007, this is quite sad. It's almost like empty and concrete, and there's no trees there. So, and when we are and it doesn't get better with like urban intensification. So even after the development goes in, like, let's look at the 3 photographs here. So the photo on the left here is a front lawn of someone's house in Etobicoke. And this is a little leaf linden. So little leaf linden actually can grow much larger than this, but look at the rooting space. It's very, very small. And the photograph on the middle is they have two buildings, and there's not a lot of space or even good quality soil for it to support any mass tree. And if you look at the photo where the bench is on the right, there's no front lawn. This is only just enough to put like a garden, smaller gardens. You cannot plant a tree there. So frankly, these spaces have no room. Like the way we're thinking about planning and urban intensification, we don't put any thinking around how can we support mass trees. What we need is radical approaches, prioritizing like green-blue infrastructure. So when we are thinking about putting in a development, poor soil quality can have very, very detrimental effects, long-term detrimental effects on nature, connectivity, and humans. And even if you think about the cost-benefit analysis, why not put the focus on soil so that it's going back to the roots and going back to like soil ecology and making sure it's really, really intact so that it could support mass trees and green infrastructure going forward instead of replacing it consistently every like 15, 20 years. This is, you're already putting the focus has on the onset of development. So how do we achieve that is through knowledge mobilization and sharing and adopting a very true transdisciplinary approach in collaboration with different partners. So we are currently doing that at Lincoln. So some of my current work is working with the Brock University, and we're applying principles of doing that in a new development site in Lincoln, Ontario. We have an institution partner, Brock University, Vineland Research and Innovation, which is an industry partner. And we're also working with the town of Lincoln, the municipality, and my tax fellowship allows this sort of partnership to happen. And what we're trying to do here, we're constantly in communication to share knowledge and adopt our knowledge and practices from the onset of development. So we're open to learn from each other and exchange knowledge in a much more constructive way so that we don't have to infuse green infrastructure into development after the development goes up. So when we take a very holistic approach to applied research, we can achieve like great things. So this is a figure that I adopted from Silik's book chapter. It talks about this concept of like how to merge landscape ecology and other ecology and sustainability and design to benefit human population. And when you're thinking about human population, we shouldn't think about that as a separate entity. We should think about humans being part of the urban ecosystem, which is going to be good for forest and wildlife, but also good for people. And when we're thinking about some of the social systems, like making sure equity, we are addressing some of the questions in equity, accessibility of green space for people, and also in like landscape ecology, we think about connecting these dots and these matrices so that we could have better connectivity for nature in cities, but also this serves the people, because when you have pocket-sized parks spread out across the development, it allows for more access and for people. So what we're trying to do with this project is to apply research and principles to make urban cities more resilient for like forest and people. And if we have this foundation solid, what we can do is make research more accessible. So of course, as academics, we tend to like publish in so many other journals, but these are not easily accessible to the practitioners that we're working with. So this constant share of information and practice allows for that knowledge transfer, but also consider publishing in like trade journals and trade magazines. And by supporting, and some of the work that has part of my research, I make it a point to support the work of NGOs, municipal partners, and the broader community. So we're always in constant exchange of knowledge. And when we are in constant exchange of knowledge, it's easier to get applied research more applied into the real world and making sure that this is being integrated into practice. So I want to end off on this note. Instead of getting your child, so this is a photograph of my nephews and niece. Instead of getting your child the next generation iPhone, invest in the urban forest for the well-being of our future generation. And not when you're talking about investment, we're not just talking about money or funds, we're talking about the time you would take to share knowledge, the research that you're doing with practitioners, but also learn from practitioners, invite different stakeholders into your research, and that allows for greater things to happen. So not just invest money, but invest your time and energy into that. On that note, I do want to say thank you for coming. And if there are any questions, I'll be glad to take them. And do feel free. So the project that we are working on in Prudence in Lincoln, it is still, I just started that in July. So feel free to follow me and Brock USRC like for any updates on projects.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janani. That was such an interesting topic, and we thank you guys for tuning in. So for the next part here, we're going to move towards a graduate student early researcher Q&A panel. But before you leave, I just want to remind you guys about a couple things. So like I said, thank you guys so much for coming. Our next seminar is in 2 weeks' time, and it will be taking place on November 6th at the same time, 10 a.m. That speaker will be Dr. Helen Jarvie from the University of Waterloo, and her presentation will be titled A Clearer View